The age of steel and faith had risen in Europe like a storm gathering upon the horizon. It was the close of the 11th century, a time when the hearts of men burned with the promise of redemption and the thirst for power. The call of the First Crusade echoed through castles and cathedrals, across valleys and mountains, summoning knights and peasants alike to march eastward, to wrest the Holy Land from the hands of those who ruled it. Among those who heard this call were the sons of noble houses, men who sought not only salvation of the soul but also dominion of the earth. And among them stood Baldwin of Boulogne, a figure carved by ambition, faith, and unyielding will. Baldwin was not born to be king. He was the younger brother, overshadowed by Godfrey of Bouillon, a man destined in the eyes of many to lead the crusade to triumph. Yet fate has a way of weaving threads where men least expect them. In the courts of France, Baldwin learned discipline and the art of war, not with the expectation of wearing a crown, but with the hunger of a soldier who knew that kingdoms are built not by birth alone but by daring. The blood of nobility coursed in his veins, but it was his restless spirit that drove him forward. When Pope Urban II's thunderous call to arms swept through Christendom in 1095, promising both remission of sins and eternal glory to those who would liberate Jerusalem, Baldwin and his brothers answered. They gathered men, sold lands, and prepared to abandon the safety of their homes for the perilous march into the unknown. For Baldwin, this was more than a holy mission. It was an opening, a chance to carve his own destiny beyond the shadow of his elder brother. The march eastward was no pilgrimage of peace. It was a crucible. Across the plains of Hungary, the mountains of Anatolia, and the burning deserts of Syria, the Crusaders bled, starved, and fought their way onward. Baldwin revealed himself as more than a follower. He was a commander who inspired men with both words and sword, a figure who did not bend when hunger gnawed at their bellies or when arrows darkened the sky. His ambitions stirred quietly within him, for he saw that the journey was not only to save Jerusalem but to seize what the East might offer to those strong enough to take it. In the lands of Edessa, Baldwin's destiny took its first turn. There, amid the shifting sands of alliance and rebellion, he saw opportunity. The ruler of Edessa, beset by threats from every side, sought protection and found it in Baldwin. With cunning and a warrior's instinct, Baldwin was adopted as heir, securing control of the city in 1098. Thus he became the first Crusader prince, planting a seed of Latin power deep in foreign soil. It was a bold stroke, one that revealed Baldwin's nature. Where others marched for holy purpose, he marched also for sovereignty. He wore the mantle of faith, but beneath it beat the heart of a ruler in the making. The crusade surged onward, and in 1099, Jerusalem fell to the armies of Christendom. Blood stained the sacred stones, and the long dream of generations was seized with fire and steel. Upon that victory, the question of rule arose. Godfrey of Bouillon, noble and pious, refused to be crowned king in the city where Christ had worn a crown of thorns. He styled himself instead as defender of the Holy Sepulchre, a ruler of humility in name though not in power. Baldwin watched, and in the silence of his heart he understood that Jerusalem would not forever be content with a ruler who denied a crown. The year 1100 brought the turning point. Godfrey died suddenly, his body failing while his followers looked to heaven in mourning. But Baldwin looked to Jerusalem with resolve. He would not hesitate, for kingdoms are seized by those who step forward while others linger in grief. He left Edessa and marched swiftly to the holy city, his mind set upon the throne. Opposition rose against him, for not all desired his rule, but Baldwin was no stranger to the storms of rivalry. With sword and with oath, with steel and with cunning, he pressed forward. Upon Christmas Day in Bethlehem, in the year of our Lord 1100, Baldwin was crowned King of Jerusalem. The crown was laid upon his brow not in humility but in defiance of death and uncertainty. He was the first to bear that title openly, to proclaim not only the defense of the holy city but its dominion. In that moment, the Crusader conquest became more than a fleeting triumph. It became a kingdom. From the moment the crown touched his head, Baldwin bore its weight with unflinching resolve. His reign was forged in war, for the enemies of the new kingdom surrounded it on every side. The Fatimids of Egypt threatened from the south, the Seljuk Turks from the north and east. The sea, too, was a battleground. For control of the coast meant lifelines of supply and survival. Baldwin did not wait for war to come to him. He carried it outward, striking swiftly against his foes, securing the fragile borders of his realm with blood and iron. He understood that Jerusalem alone could not stand without the coast. Thus he turned his gaze to the Mediterranean, seizing cities that would open the kingdom to aid from the west. Arsif fell, Caesarea followed, and with each conquest, Baldwin stitched the coastline into the fabric of his realm. The ports became gateways, lifelines through which men, arms, and hope could flow from Europe to the fragile kingdom in the east. It was a vision of survival that only a king of bold heart could grasp. Baldwin was not only a warrior but a master of alliance. He knew that steel alone could not secure the kingdom. He made treaties with some and broke others when the tide of fortune demanded it. He understood the ways of the East, the shifting sands of loyalty, and he wielded them with the precision of a general who saw the battlefield not only in the clash of armies but in the council of rulers. His crown was never a comfort. It was a burden borne upon battlefields, beneath the shadow of walls, and within the councils of knights who doubted and questioned. Yet Baldwin never faltered. The fire that burned in him since his youth drove him onward. He believed that the kingdom of Jerusalem must not only endure but grow, for only in growth could it survive the relentless storm that surrounded it. The years passed, each marked by campaigns and conquests, by moments of triumph and nights of uncertainty. Yet Baldwin's name grew with each passing season. He was no longer merely Baldwin of Boulogne. He was Baldwin, King of Jerusalem, the Shahenshah of the Latin East, a monarch who had turned Crusader dream into reality. His enemies feared him, his allies respected him, and his people looked to him as the bulwark of their fragile existence. But within the grandeur of kingship lay also the solitude of a man set apart. Baldwin carried the weight of expectation, the hopes of thousands who had crossed seas for salvation, and the fragile thread of a kingdom born in fire. He was a ruler who could not rest, for rest meant weakness, and weakness in the Holy Land was death. His reign was a ceaseless march, a rhythm of sword and crown, of prayer and conquest. Thus part 1 of Baldwin's story closes upon the vision of a king who rose from younger brother to crowned monarch, who turned conquest into kingdom, and who carried upon his shoulders not only the title of King of Jerusalem but the destiny of Christendom in the East. His reign was not yet ended, his battles not yet complete. The sands of the Holy Land awaited his steps, and the enemies of his crown sharpened their blades. But Baldwin stood unyielding, a figure of steel and faith, prepared to carve the rest of his legend into the chronicles of time. The crown of Jerusalem was no ornament of peace. It was forged of fire, bound by peril, and worn by a man who knew that survival in the Holy Land was never granted, only seized. Baldwin, the first king of Jerusalem, had secured the throne with boldness and vision, but now he faced the true test of kingship. For the enemies of his realm were many, their banners pressing from every horizon, and the fragile dream of a Crusader kingdom could vanish like mist beneath the sun if his hand faltered even once. The Fatimids of Egypt were his most relentless foes. From the south, their armies swept upward, determined to tear Jerusalem back into the dominion. Year after year, Baldwin rode out to meet them. The fields near Ramla became his crucible. There, on those plains, the clash of steel and the roar of battle thundered time and again. Twice he faced overwhelming numbers, and twice he turned the tide with courage and the strength of his knights. In the second battle, when defeat seemed certain and even his own men despaired, Baldwin charged with a handful of companions into the heart of the enemy host. The shock of his valor broke their ranks, and the field was won. It was a victory not of numbers but of indomitable spirit, a moment when kingly resolve shone brighter than the sun itself. Yet Baldwin knew that war was not won upon a single field. The kingdom needed the sea, for only through the ports could lifeblood flow from Europe to the Latin East. Without ships and reinforcements, Jerusalem would wither, cut off and besieged. Thus Baldwin turned his gaze to the coast. With the aid of Genoese and Venetian fleets, he struck like a lion upon the cities of the shore. Arsif yielded, then Caesarea, and later Beirut. Each conquest tightened his grip upon the coastline, and with every port secured, the kingdom breathed more freely. The sight of Latin banners upon the sea walls of Beirut proclaimed to the world that Jerusalem was not a fragile relic but a kingdom growing in strength. Merchants came, pilgrims arrived, knights crossed the waters to serve beneath the cross. Baldwin had opened the gates of survival and prosperity, and his realm was no longer a desperate outpost but a beacon of Christendom planted in the soil of the East. But the king was not only a warrior of conquest. He was a master of balance. Among the Armenian lords, the Syrian Christians, and even some of the Muslim emirs, Baldwin forged alliances. He was neither blind to the divisions of the East nor unwilling to bend pride when necessity demanded it. He ruled not merely with the sword but with an understanding that kingdoms survive as much upon diplomacy as upon battle. His reign was a delicate weaving of force and friendship, a tapestry in which even enemies might, for a season, be bound to his cause. Yet always the shadow of danger returned. In 1113, a coalition of Muslim rulers gathered with the intent of crushing the Crusader states once and for all. Their armies swept forward, vast and terrible, and the kingdom seemed to tremble on the brink of destruction. But Baldwin, unyielding, rode forth with his knights, and though the battle was bitter, his defiance forced the coalition to retreat. The kingdom survived, not by accident but by the iron will of its king. Years passed, and the figure of Baldwin grew in legend. He was no longer the younger brother, no longer the opportunist of Edessa. He was the king of Jerusalem, a monarch of fire, one who had borne the crown not in halls of ease but on the fields of struggle. His reign was the fortress of the Latin East, and his name was spoken with respect even by his foes. But time, the eternal adversary, does not yield even to kings. Baldwin's body bore the weight of years of campaigning, the scars of battle, the exhaustion of endless war. Still, he pressed onward, for the kingdom's safety demanded no rest. In 1118, he led his army into Egypt, striking at the very heart of his enemies, seeking to cripple their strength and secure his realm forever. It was a bold gamble, a testament to his spirit that even in the dusk of his years he sought not defense alone but victory. Yet in that campaign, sickness struck. Far from the comfort of Jerusalem, amidst the sands of Egypt, the strength of the king faltered. Fever gripped him, and his body, which had withstood the strain of decades of war, now bent beneath the hand of fate. His knights carried him, hoping to bring him home, but Baldwin knew the truth. His time had come, not upon a throne, not within the safety of stone walls, but in the dust of the campaign, where kings are proven and legends are born. When he breathed his last, there was no cry of despair, but a silence that weighed like the closing of an age. His body was borne back to Jerusalem, the city he had crowned with kingship, and there he was laid to rest in the church of the Holy Sepulchre, the heart of the faith he had fought to defend. Yet Baldwin's death was not an end but a beginning of remembrance. He was hailed not only as a king but as the architect of the kingdom itself, the one who had taken the fleeting triumph of conquest and shaped it into enduring sovereignty. He had ruled with courage, cunning, and vision, and his reign had carved the foundation upon which future kings would stand. To his followers, he was Baldwin, the first crowned king of Jerusalem, the Shahenshah of the Latin East, the warrior monarch who never surrendered. To history, he became the image of what it meant to seize destiny with both hands, to wear the crown not as a gift but as a prize wrested from the jaws of peril. And so his tale closes, not in weakness but in glory. For though he lies beneath the stones of Jerusalem, his spirit walks forever upon its walls. The memory of Baldwin is not of a man who yielded but of a king who rose, who fought, who built, and who in death left behind not silence but a living kingdom. The story of Baldwin is the story of courage that defies despair, of ambition that shapes history, of faith bound to steel. He was not born to be king, yet he became one. He was not destined to reign, yet he ruled with power. And though the sands of centuries have drifted over his throne, his name remains, etched into the chronicles of time as the first king of Jerusalem, the monarch who turned conquest into kingdom and wore the crown with the spirit of a lion.